All right, everyone. Hi, welcome back. I am so excited for today's conversation because it's all about, it's more than just self-defense. It's about women reclaiming their voices, their space, and their power. So today I am sitting down with Elicia Ybarra. She's the founder of Pretty Hands and Hard Punches, a program that's all about equipping women with not just physical self-defense skills, but the confidence and awareness to move through life boldly. Elicia, welcome. I have been looking forward to this because your work resonates so deeply with what I do. Let's start with your story. What made you start Pretty Hands and Hard Punches? And was there a moment in your life that made you realize this is the work that I really need to be doing?
Hi, Lisa, and thank you so much for having me. You are such an inspiration to me. I'm very excited to be here and to kind of share my knowledge with your listeners. The way that I got started, I'm a lifelong martial artist. So I've been training in Taekwondo for 30 years this year. I have a 4th Dan black belt in Taekwondo and a 1st Dan in Hapkido, although I have trained in multiple styles throughout my career. And what I found after I became a mother in my early 30s was that although I was physically capable of defending myself, which is awesome, right? Knowing how to kick and punch is important. I didn't know anything about how to protect my mental and emotional space. And I didn't know how to set boundaries, which made me extremely vulnerable, especially in my younger years, to some people trying to take advantage of me. So the reason that I started Pretty Hands was because while I was going through my healing journey and understanding what kind of had happened to me as a young woman, I found that I was very much identifying with victims of these cult shows that I was watching, like binge watching just for fun, things like The Vow and The Aftermath. And I was like, why am I identifying with these victims? I wasn't in a cult. But as I started to kind of research into cult-like mind control and that kind of aspect of the cult, what I found was that I was a victim. And that was my aha moment, I was like, holy bejesus, I know why I'm relating to all of these women and men, but mainly these women was because I was groomed at a young age by my much older martial arts instructor. He started grooming me at 13. He started having sex with me by the time I was 16. And when I had the courage to walk away, I was blamed for the encounter by all of the adults that I trusted most in my life. So fast forward, 20 years, and I'm dealing with things like postpartum depression and severe depression, and I'm blaming myself for these things that are really out of my control. So I did what a lot of women have been doing, which is getting into therapy. And as I got into therapy, I realized that there's so many women who don't know how to set boundaries effectively in their life. They believe that self-defense is a physical reaction to an attack. I have to physically be able to defend myself. But the reality is self-defense is much more than just physical reaction. It is learning how to protect your boundaries, protect your emotional and mental space, and then physically defending those boundaries if necessary.
Wow. What really stands out to me is how your work goes really beyond self-defense, right? It's really about shifting how women see themselves. So when women go through your training, what are the biggest changes that you see? Like, do they start standing up taller or speaking up more? How are they showing up differently just in their everyday lives?
The main transformation I see from the start of my class till the end of it is like women don't really know what they're capable of. They don't know that they are capable of even throwing a punch or hitting that hard or breaking a board, which is something that I have all women do at the end of my course to show the power that they already have inside them. And there is an aha moment for every single woman I've seen who has started my class that I don't know how to throw a punch. I've never been in a fight. I've never hit somebody, to now they're standing in front of all of these students and they're putting their hand through this board that, 15 minutes before that they didn't think was possible. Right. And there's such an empowering moment for the students to feel like, wow, I can really do this. And then I actually follow up with my students. So I hear them tell me about how they started setting more boundaries, or they started saying no to social events that made them uncomfortable. A couple of them have even been like, I broke up with that guy that wasn't treating me very well. So it's the empowerment of understanding that you are valuable in yourself. You get to define your own self-worth and your own value. And if somebody's not treating you up to that caliber, then they don't belong in your life.
Right. Because I think so many of us struggle with, especially women, we're talking about women, we've taught to be polite, not to take up space, to put everybody's comfort ahead of ourselves. And that kind of conditioning makes it really, really hard to set boundaries, right? Because you're always saying, oh, I'm sorry, or moving out of the way, and, shrinking down and getting out of people's way and being quiet so you don't make a fuss, that kind of thing. I mean, I know why so many struggle with it, because we were taught to be that way, right? That's just our conditioning. But how do we start unlearning that and stepping into our power? Or how do you then teach us to unlearn that and step into our power?
So I'll start with the why, right? Why do we act this way? Why do we use the minimizing language in order to subdue ourselves so that we don't come across as too assertive, or my favorite, too bitchy? And the reason it is because if we look at the generations before us, if we look at our grandmothers and our great grandmothers, they had no choice. They could not say no. Marital rape was not a thing until the 70s, and it was not a law until the 90s. So they had to find ways to politely decline without actually saying no, which watered down through the generations has taught my generation, your generation, and the generations before us that you can't actually, as a woman, say no. You have to beat around the bush. You have to politely decline in order not to hurt his ego, because if you hurt his ego and he attacks you, it's your fault. You shouldn't have been so rude or mean or assertive.
Right.
And then on the flip side of that, young men and boys are taught persistence pays off. Don't take no for an answer. Just keep trying and you'll get the prize.
Right,
so we have a society where women are told not to say no and men are told not to take no for an answer. And it creates this very confusing kind of dynamic between men and women who are trying to find boundaries. Because how do you set boundaries if you can't say no?
Right.
And so in my course, right, what I teach is that it's okay to be assertive. It's okay to come across as rude. It is okay to not be meek and submissive and quiet. It is okay to be loud, say I'm not interested, no, and not allow someone to get into your personal space. And that is where the think, yell, run, fight, tell method comes when it comes to danger. Things like situational awareness, learning how your language, tone, and posture, right? So often as women, we're taught to hunch our shoulders, to look down, not to make eye contact, not to talk too loudly, which I do not do well. I talk very loudly.
I'm loud as well. I know.
Right? But we're taught that that is unattractive. It's unladylike. And how do we get out of that danger, right? How do we run? How do we escape? A lot of times what we are taught goes directly against our gift of fear and survival. We are taught to disregard the gift of fear, not to, internalize it as if it's something we're doing wrong, instead of understanding that as human beings, we have fear because we're survivors. Right? As human beings, we are survivors.
It's our regular instinct, right? That we're taught to not pay attention to.
So in my class, what I teach is how to recognize that, how to trust your intuition, how to trust seeing those red flags and not put the rose-colored glasses on and talk your way out or talk yourself out of feeling that fear, right? Oh, maybe, it's just a bad day for him. No, if you feel fear around somebody that you're close to in your life, then don't be around that person. You should not be fearing them. And that's not to fearmonger and say, live your life in fear. That's not what I'm saying. And that's not what I teach. What I teach is how to recognize it and how to distinguish between those types of bad habits we were taught to subdue ourselves and how to recognize through situational awareness and red flags, the things that could be dangerous in your life.
I was just going to say that, learning to recognize those red flags, because they usually pop out right at the beginning, but we just kind of brush them aside and we make excuses and we don't really pay attention to that. Gosh, I love everything that you do. So it makes me think about how powerful women really are when we fully embody that no, right? When we say it and we mean it and there's nothing going to budge us about it. Like, it's so powerful. And saying no without an apology. Like, that's really important, to not be like, I'm sorry, but no is no. You don't have to over explain. You can be firm. You can just say no.
Absolutely.
And for women who might be hearing this and thinking like, okay, I really want to learn this. I really want to set some boundaries because I'm really bad at it. And I'm finally waking up to the idea that I can do this. Where do I start? Like, what's something practical that women can start doing today to feel safer and empowered, but they haven't taken a self-defense class? Like, what's something that they can feel safer in doing or thinking or acting, just something.
First, you can take the time to take a deep breath, right? And recognize that no is a full sentence. You do not need to explain your no. No is a no. And second, I actually had to do this myself as I was developing, actually well before I developed my curriculum, I will say, and it is starting slowly to set boundaries for the people in your life, for yourself. And I actually have a worksheet that your listeners can download. The promo code is IdealU. It's on my website. I will send you the link so you can post it in the description. And really what it does is it helps you walk through step by step who this ideal version of you is and those types of boundaries she sets. Because when you're in the moment, it is so hard to recognize boundaries that are being crossed. You simply get emotional, which is the same thing I did, right? So there's no shame in that, but you do get emotional. I just don't want to be treated that way. I don't want to be spoken to that way. But once you bring the emotion into it, you can't really recognize where you want the boundary to be. What exactly is that person doing that is making you feel so rejected, so, like with imposter syndrome, right? What is it? And so my worksheet helps you take the ideal you and set boundaries for her. And what that means is, what does she look like, right? For me, when I was sitting at 4 a.m. in severe depression, staring at the wall, crying, I did this exercise. And the ideal version of me was with my hair parted in the middle, just like it is here, a pink blazer with pink lipstick. I remember clearly being like, that is the strongest version of me I can think of. And now, years later, this is how I present myself. And that is step by step the way that you can do it. How does that ideal version of you feel? And once you have the idea of how does she look and how does she feel, then you have the empowerment. Now you're like, well, what are her boundaries? What does she allow in her life? Because you're not thinking about it in the moment, you're thinking about it in the future. And then you can step by step start to enforce those boundaries, start to set those boundaries, whether they're emotional, financial, friendship, social. A lot of times when we think boundaries, we think of physical boundaries, right? My physical bubble that I teach, my 6-year-old, don't go into physical bubbles. But the reality is there is a whole line of boundaries that we really need to set for ourselves so that we can understand who we are and the things that we're willing to tolerate and not tolerate. Once you have those boundaries, then you can ask yourself, while you feel so empowered, how does she handle those boundaries when they're crossed? How does she handle when somebody wants an explanation for her no? Does she say, my no is my no, none of your damn business, okay? I'm saying no, take that and respect it. Right. Or does she try to explain herself, right? What does she do? And after that, you can do the final step, which is the hardest, and that is, who does this ideal version of you allow in her life? What type of friends does she have? And this was an extremely difficult decision for me when I was going through this process myself, because I had so many toxic friends that I loved and I cared about, that I realized as I started to build this ideal version of myself, that they were not the type of people that I really wanted in my life long term. And I had to slowly cut those ties. And I will preface this really quick with saying that when you do this and you're all empowered and you're like, this is my boundary, the people in your life that were getting ahead or using you because of your lack of boundaries and it was making their life much easier, they are not going to like when you put your foot down, when you draw that line in your sand, and you're going to have to repeat yourself. And they're going to ask you, why have you changed and what has happened to you and who is this new person? Yeah. And that is where confidence comes in hand. You know that you are doing this so that you can be this ideal version of yourself, and you don't need anybody to give you permission to say no or to set these boundaries. Mm-hmm. And the last thing I'll say on this is when you become that ideal version of yourself and you're building it and you start drawing these lines where you're like, this is clearly what I'm okay with and what I'm not okay with, and somebody starts to like push that line, you become acutely aware when somebody's pushing your boundaries, and that makes you effective and confident in how you handle it after that, because now you're recognizing exactly what is happening and why it's happening and why you're feeling that way, and then you can make an informed decision on how you want to proceed.
You're absolutely right. I think for me, one of the hardest things was saying no. Once I started my journey in becoming more confident and sort of getting out of that that family structure where I did everything I was supposed to do all the time, never complain, just go and do and make everybody happy, you know, all the time. So one of the hardest things to do was to say no. But what I learned was to say no to things that weren't super important at the time, you know, like don't start with like, no, I don't, you know, I don't want to go to work or whatever. I mean, start with like, no, I think I don't really want to take a walk with you right now, or, you know, something really easy, like, no, I don't want to have tacos for dinner. I'd rather have this, like something really easy. You can just say no. And then you kind of get used to it and you're like, oh, wow, I just said no. That feels really good. So something really easy that it's not going to cause chaos or anything like that. Just, you know, ease into it, because I know how hard it is. Like you see that you get that feeling, you're like, I just don't want to do that. Or I just don't want to be here. Or I just don't want to talk to you or whatever. Yeah. Like you get that feeling and then you are like, oh, I'm not strong enough to say no to this. But you're strong enough to say, you know, no, I don't want tacos tonight. I'd rather have spaghetti or something, like something easy.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Right? Start small. You don't got to write out all your boundaries and then send them on a Google Doc to your family about what you're willing and not willing to do.
Right.
And also, you know, just like you said, build that confidence for yourself. And another good exercise to do is when you start to feel like your boundary is being pushed, like, no, maybe I don't want to go meet my friends tonight for margaritas, right? Maybe I don't want to do that. Ask yourself why. Is it because you're just tired from a work day, or is it because, you know, the people that you're meeting are extremely toxic? And that will also help you be empowered and get the confidence to understand with knowledge, like, why do I not want to go to Margarita Wednesdays, right? Which actually sounds amazing, but Margarita Wednesdays with this group of friends.
Right. Sometimes you don't want to. I mean, I had a group of friends years ago, and there was one woman that every event she got sloppy drunk. She ran off with someone. Like, we're always worrying where she is. Whoa, where's her purse? We're trying to get her home, put her in her bed. You know, it was just like something. So after a while, you're just like, I don't even care about going. I don't want to go. It's too much of a hassle. But, you know, I didn't want to let down my friends, and I didn't want to like not be there. And part of me was like, well, someone's got to take care of her and everything. But then I was like, it's not my responsibility. Like, she's not, you know, whether she gets home and gets in bed, or like, I want to help, but it's every single time over and over again. And so one thing that I wanted to bring up, and you said this as well, you know, once you start setting boundaries, like people around you who aren't used to that are going to be like, what? Like, they're going to freak out. And then people are going to fall away. So there are, you know, there is a lot that happens when you step into your power. And some people aren't going to like it. And those people are going to go away. And those people are not meant to be in your life. So that's okay, you know, and it's okay to grieve it, and it's okay to work through it. And if you go to a counseling, then, you know, work through that. But you have to know that the person that you want to be, and that person that you're stepping into, that authentic you, isn't friends with those people who don't like your boundaries, right? That don't like that they're not able to take advantage of you anymore.
And the one thing I'll add to that, Lisa, is also that a lot of times those people are the people that were benefiting most from you not having boundaries.
Exactly.
Because when you don't have boundaries, the people in your life set your boundaries for you, and it's for their benefit.
Right. Absolutely. And so when you think about it that way, you're like, oh, but I really loved that person. Okay, you can still love them. You can still love them with all your heart. You just don't have to have them in your life if they're not respecting you and they're not respecting your boundaries. You know, that's a really important boundary. That respect is a really important boundary, and to figure out what you will accept and what you won't accept as far as behavior to you, at you, around you, that is a really big boundary that, you know, you've got to figure out and say that behavior is unacceptable to me. I don't need that person in my life. You know, I mean, I've done that a few times. It's not easy, but it has to be done. It has to be done. So let's talk about sacred rage.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to have the conversation with you is because your work aligns so deeply with something that I've been working on, and then have invited you into, is rising in our sacred rage, right? And we have planned a retreat. So many of us have been taught to suppress our rage, push down our emotions, not take up any space. And we've gotten sick. We've literally gotten physically sick because of not being able to express ourselves, right? But what if our anger was actually a source of power? What if we could change it of instead of making us sick, it fueled us, right? What if rage, when we honored it and channeled it, could be a force for protection, for transformation, and for leadership? So how do you see anger? Well, of course, you see anger showing up in self-defense, but how do you think women can start embracing it instead of fearing it?
So I think recognizing that, you know, anger is not historically an emotion that women are allowed to display, right? Anger is an emotion men are allowed to display. And a matter of fact, they usually get praised for their anger. Wow, you hit that wall so hard when your team lost. Yeah. But for women, anger is considered, wow, you're not, that's not ladylike. That's not feminine. And the first is really understanding that every emotion that you have, you are entitled to have. Now, how you display that emotion, you are not entitled to do. For example, you know, the dude that hits the wall, that's not cool, right? Like, but recognizing that anger is an emotion that you as a woman are allowed to have, and finding healthy ways to channel that anger. For me, I was a very angry child. Okay. I had a lot of anger issues. And as I got older and I hit puberty, it was like, at first it was just kind of funny when I was like an adolescent. And then as I got older, it was like, oh, yeah, that's not ladylike. You know, nobody's going to want to date a girl that, you know, can punch that hard. So I found, I was literally told that by my instructor.
Because I mean, I remember those messages, you know, you can't be angry, you have to be nice, you know.
Yeah, and I was a martial artist, so I sparred. I mean, I fought like from the time I was 8 years old until I was 22, I fought every week, and I would fight much older boys. And, you know, once I got mad, they called me headhunter because like when I got pissed, right, I was going to ridge hand you in the head, and a ridge hand is using the side of your hand to just knock someone silly. And so my parents ended up buying me a blue man that lit up that I could punch and I could let out that anger for. And I'm sure, you know, like I know all your listeners can't go buy a blue man, right? Or a bob and like beat it up. But we can find ways, a heavy workout, you know, going into the bathroom. I used to go into the bathroom when I was training for sparring competitions, and I would take a water bottle and I would just scream as loud as I could and get out the anger that was just bottled up so deep inside of me. And that's where all of like, especially with this rage retreat, right, where we teach these healthy ways for us as women to let out this anger and not bottle it up. Because I firmly believe, as somebody who is diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease and rheumatoid arthritis, that one of the causes of that was that I had to suppress my feelings, my anger, and my emotions for so many years, trying to be what all of these men in the martial arts industry told me to be. And the reality is that we as women need a place to let out that anger in a healthy environment.
Right. So a couple of things that I used to do is either like be in my car and scream, right, as I'm driving around, because nobody's really hearing you. You could be on the freeway and scream your brains out. Or you could punch a pillow on your bed. Like you could actually get it out, you know, or doing some, you know, like taking a walk, but then sprinting for like 30 seconds, you know, like getting that burst of energy out. It really helps your nervous system. And like you, I have a few autoimmune diseases from holding all of that in, not rising in my sacred rage, but learning that what I thought and how I felt and what was happening to me didn't matter. What I felt
it was your fault, right?
What I had to say didn't matter. It was my fault. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have, you know, I should behave. I should be quiet. I should listen. All of the things that I don't do at all now. You know, my husband said something to me the other day about just joking around with me, like, oh, you're not going to listen to me. And I'm like, have I ever listened to you? You know, am I ever going to stop being sassy? No, not at all. Since I found my voice, it's not happening. But yeah, there was a time when I was the good girl and I was quiet. And, you know, I just, the difference between that girl and the girl I am now, or the woman I am now, is night and day. But when we talk about rising in our sacred rage, right, we're talking about exploring, expressing, and embracing the power of our emotions. So this retreat that we're having is going to be a safe space. We're going to storytell. We're going to let out our emotions. We're going to reclaim our voice. So we're going to have some workshops. We're having movement expression. We're having storytelling circles. We're having learning some empowerment tools, like how to set boundaries and walking through that kind of stuff. And then your self-defense class, of course, is happening as well. And then other mindfulness type exercises where we're going to learn to come back to self. I call it reeling it in. That's my thing of like just reeling it in, come back to self. Sometimes we're so out there and we're getting mad. Like I do this. I admit I do this because I get really involved in politics and what's happening. And so I'm out there and I'm doing all, and I'm not at myself. And so I find I'm holding my breath, or I'm just, you could feel the rage rising up in me, and I'm just, so I have to reel it back in, come back to self, come back to this tiny little spot in the universe where I'm at, and remind myself that I'm safe, I'm happy, I have a good life, just like come back, be mindful. And if I still am feeling that pressure, then I need to do something about it. So I take a walk, or I garden, I get my hands in the dirt. I've got sharp objects and I'm doing, those kinds of things. It really helps, right? So let's then just talk about this. We are going to be in Duvall, Washington, which is this beautiful little picturesque town just about 30 miles outside of Seattle. We're going to be at a place called Mosswood Hollow, which is a retreat center built by a woman in the 70s who created this most exquisite retreat center that started out as a little house, but has turned into this 25-bedroom, amazing, gorgeous place on this amazing land. I think there's a beaver in the river, and there's a beautiful teakwood yurt that we're going to have some of our sessions in, and it's going to be phenomenal. So it's March 28th through the 30th. It's over a weekend, and both myself and Elicia will be there to teach you how to set boundaries, how to defend yourself, but also to listen to you, to see you, to hear you, to acknowledge you, your rage, and to be able to express it in a safe space and in a place where no one's going to say you're making too much noise or you can't do that. And I believe we're going to be breaking boards as well. Is that true?
We will be breaking boards. We're all going to pull out that inner power and show each other and ourselves that we can take our very own hand and put it straight through a board when and if we want to.
So I'm excited. I can't wait. We have 2 months until the retreat. There's still space available. So make sure you sign up and come and express yourself. Excuse me. I feel like I could talk to you forever, Elicia, and you know that we could. But the real magic happens when women take action, right? So when they can step into spaces, they can practice their power and feel a shift and feel their own strength. I mean, that is magical. That is amazing. So if you're listening to this and this conversation is speaking to you, here's what to do next. Follow Elicia and Pretty Hands, Hard Punches. She's on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. She has a YouTube channel. Join us at the Rising in Sacred Rage Retreat. This is where you get to step into this space where your voice, your power, and your rage are fully honored. And finally, practice one thing today. And maybe it's standing a little taller, setting a boundary without apologizing, or saying no without explaining, because it all starts with one step. So Elicia, thank you so much for this conversation. And I know that this is just the beginning of something amazing and powerful.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I absolutely adore you and love speaking with you. I cannot wait for this Rising in Sacred Rage Retreat. I think that all the women are going to come out just such more of amazing women than they already are.
True. All right. Thank you. We will speak soon. Bye, everybody.